Hello everybody and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford and joining me to review the 2022 Formula 2 season we have Inside F2 editor LA Wilshaw, Inside F2 writer Lawrence Griffin and former Formula 2 journalist Craig Woolard. Coming up on the show then, quite simply, we review the 2022 Formula 2 season. That is what we're here for today, so let's get stuck into it. First of all, it's nice to see you all in person. A couple of weeks into the winter break. Formula 2 hasn't been on our screens for a little while, Lawrence. Are you missing it already?
Yeah, already missing it, our favourite racing series, but counting down the days now until next season. And to be honest, it's been entertaining enough just watching who's going to pop up in which seat for next season, because try as we might in our sort of 2023 grid prediction video, it's very hard to know where everyone's going to end up. So that's been a good one to watch. So that's cured me for a little while at least.
Lovely. And LA, great to see you in person, isn't it? It's really nice. We're in a studio. We're all nice and close to each other, which is it's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels really good. I mean, obviously, normally we see each other through the laptop bit, so it's definitely nice to see you all in person.
Absolutely. And Craig, first time joining us today on Inside F2. Welcome to the podcast. What have you made of the Formula 2 season? I mean, it's a competitive season, wasn't it?
Yeah, very competitive all the way through, really. Lots of different teams winning, lots of different drivers coming to the fore as well, due to the fact that I'm now a former Formula 2 journalist. Obviously I had to take a little bit of a step back in my watchingness of it, if you will, partway through the season, but I certainly kept tabs of it, more of a, as a fan, as the year progressed, and as intensely as I was at the start of the year.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to have you with us, and looking forward to really getting into it. And you just mentioned there about there's been a lot of winners this season. I've actually got the stats in front of me. It's been 12 different winning drivers this season, which is the joint most winners that we've had in the modern era of Formula 2. 8 different winning teams, which is the most ever teams that have won in a single season. 6 different pole sitters, which is also the joint most we've ever had. So it's definitely been it's been the most competitive season in Formula 2, or the modern era of Formula 2 history. However, we then had Felipe Drugovich winning the title by 101 points, which is also the single biggest margin that someone's won a title by, Lawrence. How would you sum up the 2022 season? It's been a bit of an odd one, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a strange one, and as Formula 2 often is, full of chaos, apart from Felipe Drugovich, who seems to have emerged through all of the manic goings-on of Formula 2 and has not suffered any issues with reliability, no major errors throughout the season, and he's just run away with it. Like you say, the most competitive season we've had, yet such a huge winning margin. What's really been almost more fascinating at times is watching the battle for the top 3. There's so many drivers in there vying for that top 3 spot, and that sort of swung a lot and changed towards the end of the season. So it's been a real mixed bag this year, which is always nice to see.
Craig, I'm interested to get your view on Felipe Drugovich. Obviously, it ended up being a very dominant season from him, didn't it? What were your thoughts on his season, really, and MP season as well? Because it's been incredibly impressive from him, hasn't it?
So with MP, they've been building up for a little while now. They've come a very long way since the days of having Mahavir Raghunathan in their team, for example, and they're now this devastating force in Formula 2, and we're seeing glimpses of it in Formula 3 as well. But this is the culmination of all of that work they've been putting in over the past few seasons, and bringing Felipe Drugovich back to the team where he was so successful in his first Formula 2 season really was like the cherry on the top. Obviously, Felipe didn't have the strongest season with Virtuosi, but with MP, he just slotted in perfectly, and he was just devastatingly consistent. When he was on the money, he was right up there on the money. When he was not quite on the money, he was still picking up those big points, those fourths, those fifths. And at the end of the day, that's what makes the championship of 100 points margin over a championship of, 20 or 30 points.
Definitely. And LA, in terms of the consistency, I suppose, that Craig has just touched on, we saw it in 2020 when Mick Schumacher won the championship, didn't we? Of how he didn't necessarily, I think it was two wins all season, but he managed to win the championship just through that consistency of just constantly scoring points. And it's the same with Felipe Drugovich this season, isn't it?
Yeah, he's had 5 wins this season, and the closest person to him was Liam Lawson with 4. So he's not sort of dominated as in won every race weekend. But what he's done is he's actually got points in 24 out of 28 races. There's only 4 races he's dropped. And a couple, not massive reliability issues by any means, but just a few, minor problems for him. So yeah, it's. I think what it is, you're right. It's not just the consistency either. It's keeping his nose clean, because when it was around Baku, his response when he was speaking, to anyone that would listen at the time, was that he wanted to keep his nose clean. He wanted to stay out of trouble. And in a way, I kind of felt like he was being a bit conservative, and maybe a bit too conservative. But he wants to win the championship and he wants to better his career. So however he chooses to do that is his own decision.
Outrageous consistency, isn't it? It's seriously impressive. Lawrence, what kind of place do you think Formula 2 is in right now? We've just had Felipe Drugovich winning the championship, but he hasn't secured a Formula 2 drive. Formula 1 drive. Obviously, great news that he's going to be joining Aston Martin as a reserve driver. But we had the same last year with Oscar Piastri not getting a Formula 1 seat. Is that concerning, especially compared to previous years, right, where you had Charles Leclerc, George Russell, won the championship straight in? Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
It is, and it seems quite bad on the face of it when you look at it, that you've had 2 years of champions in Formula 2 who have done brilliantly well, and neither of them have actually managed to make it into Formula 1 the following season. That doesn't seem at all right. I mean, Felipe Drugovich said at one point this season, either we have a situation where you can return to the series if you want, or you're automatically into Formula 1, and that would make maybe Formula 2 even more competitive, maybe even you'd have more investment in getting into Formula 2 and then winning it. But I think if you look past that, we've got Logan Sargent moving up to Formula 1 for next season, and the opportunities are still there, and I think winning in Formula 2 is still a massive, massive plus on your CV. And it just depends on what happens with Formula 1. We're seeing the likes of Fernando Alonso sticking around, into his much later years, where we've seen drivers far younger than him retire. And it's just a case of when those seats open up, Formula 2 will have the talent. It's just that they're getting to the point where they're ready to make that step up, and the seats just aren't there for them, and they're going elsewhere now. And it is becoming a problem because you've got so much talent in that field, but nowhere for them to go.
Yeah, it's the positive is that we've had still at least one driver from every single season of the modern era of Formula 2 that has progressed to Formula 1, right? And that's definitely a positive and what the series is set up for. Let's rewind to the start of the season then, Craig. And we had the biggest calendar that Formula 2 has ever seen. We reverted back to the old format, that dodgy format we had last season. Seems a long time ago now, doesn't it? And obviously the feature race taking place on a Sunday. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's much better, isn't it? Much better.
Yeah, I certainly preferred the 2 race weekend format. Obviously, this one was still slightly different compared to what was the case before and what we all knew and loved. But I quite enjoyed having the feature race on a Sunday. The main race on a Sunday, and having so many race weekends as well. Still, the big elephant of the room of the massive gap between the penultimate round and the final round, not helped by the Russia being dropped. But yeah, I thought all in all it was a really, really strong calendar. All of the big hitters in terms of the circuits that needed to be on the calendar were there. And of course the usual finale in Abu Dhabi.
We've spoken about it all season long, LA and Lawrence. It was the same last season with massive gaps in the calendar, wasn't it? And there is still that big gap between, I know you just said Sochi definitely didn't help, but there still would have been a big gap between Sochi and Abu Dhabi. Can we go to Qatar? Can we get Qatar on the Formula 2 calendar next week? So it just breaks it up nicely, doesn't it, LA?
Yeah, that'd be nice. No, it'll be a World Championship next year because of Australia. So, yeah, why not? I think we should do, for sure. And I'm kind of hoping that making that a World Championship in its own right might actually bring with it the fact that the drivers could return, for another season. I'm not sure if there's anything in grey areas already or if decisions have been made already. But from my point of view, if it's a World Championship in its own right, then therefore that driver should be able to return the following year.
Interesting. Lawrence, thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an awkward one with the calendar, I think, because then you've got such big gaps, but then you've also got your triple headers in there as well, and you think, could you space out a little bit more evenly? But you want to be in tracks like Monza and Spa when Formula One is there at the same time in order to get more fans in. So it's a really tricky one. But I think something needs to be done to tighten up the schedule, and throwing in COTA would be absolutely brilliant. I mean, Formula One is doing brilliantly in terms of moving into the American market and gaining a lot of new American fans. And the races in America, well, the many races in America that we're soon to have, COTA's been so well attended in recent years. Why not have some of that support going through to Formula 2 as well?
COTA's a perfect race circuit for F2. It's a wonderful race circuit.
Cool. All right. Yeah, that's. Let's get into the nitty gritty, guys. I want to go through every single team. We'll go through in championship finishing order and just a few comments on each team and maybe their drivers, if you like. As always, you can check out the full standings on our website, www.insidef2.com. And yes, I know that I've plugged that more times this season than Crofty has plugged Sky Glass, and I don't apologise. Go and check out our website; it's really good. Cool, right? MP Motorsport. We've just touched on Felipe Drugovich, but Lawrence, a quick word on their progress. Obviously, first time they finished in the top 5, and they've gone and won the championship. And a quick word on Clement Novalak, his season.
Yeah, incredible progress. Like Craig says, it's been building up for a while now, and something between Felipe and that team clearly works. When it's a spec series and it's all about how you set up the car, he's clearly found something with that team, and that's been really brilliant for them. And Clement Novalak, 14th in the standings, it doesn't look that good on the face of it when your teammate is winning the title. But coming in as a rookie, when we've seen how much the rookies have struggled at stages this year, I think he has shown real good signs of promise. He was 4th in Imola and then 5th the next race in Barcelona. So he has that ability. It's just not being that consistent yet. And I think for a lot of drivers who've had their first seasons this year, it really boils down to next year. How much of a step up can you make? Because I think the rookie season, you're allowed to go out and sort of learn, make those mistakes, and then return for next year. So it depends how he delivers. If he can, do what we've seen the likes of Mick Schumacher do in terms of having a first season just to learn, second to really deliver. And there's a lot of drivers that we'll talk about that probably applies to as well.
Absolutely. LA, Carlin pipped ART to P2 in the standings in the last round of the season. Good season for them.
Yeah, a bit on and off with a few things with Liam and Logan, whether it's been their own doing or whether it's been something pit stop, loose wheel. I think they've been incredible. They're a fantastic team, and I'm really a little bit gutted, even though we're not supposed to be biased. We're not fans of teams exactly, but I really sort of wanted them to win that championship. So it's a shame they just missed out, but Stephanie obviously getting her sort of official title promotion as well, which was wonderful for that team. But what Logan's gone and done, a year early, everybody was even himself, everybody had planned he would do 2 years in Formula 2. Didn't start off the season particularly amazingly, was doing a few things wrong himself, but my God, what a learner, what a fast learner he is. Turned it around, turned his head around, and turned his whole season around, and he's going to be sitting in a Formula 1 car next season. Liam's benefited a little bit this season too. He's had a couple of FP1 tests for AlphaTauri and for Red Bull, so he's jumped in 2 different Formula 1 cars, which is quite nice for him. And yeah, let's hope maybe next year he can get in an F1 car as well.
Sargent had an amazing run through the middle of the season. 20 races out of 28 that he's finished in the points this season. For someone that's come 4th in the championship and has come into it as a rookie, to get that level of consistency is so impressive. And I was looking at Liam Lawson's results actually, and his 2 highlights of the season have been Spa and Abu Dhabi, where he's got a double podium. The same weekends that he's also been driving an FP1 for AlphaTauri in Spa and for for Red Bull in Abu Dhabi. So maybe it really does give you wings. I don't know.
But
that's strike one. There you go.
I think it's going to be slightly more different in Super Formula next season to get him in FP1 and then fly him out to back to Japan for Super Formula. ART, Tao Pourchaire, obviously runner-up in the championship. Frederick Vesti, rookie season. What do you make of them, Craig?
Yeah, no puns from me regarding ART, but I think the squad has made some quiet progress this year. They've sort of gone a little bit under the radar in comparison to the previous couple of years with the current spec that we've got. I think Teo has been a bit unlucky at times. The speed has, almost certainly always been there, and there's been little bits of frustration come in as well. So I think the deficit to Djokovic was a little bit sort of exacerbated by the bad luck and some of the little bits of frustration that's come in, but you'd expect that from, one of, if not the youngest driver on the grid. I think Fred Vesti has come in quite nicely as a rookie. He's shown the progress that he's needed to make across the season, and then he should be in a position next year, hopefully, to really fight for the title.
Prema, Lawrence, interesting season. I'm sure they'll be slightly disappointed.
Yeah, you can't be anything other than disappointed when you consistently perform at such a high level, and then P4 for them in the standings this year. It's not going to plan, and on the face of it, it looked really hopeful in terms of you've got a good balance in terms of experience and youth in having Dennis Hauger, who comes in as a rookie, and Formula 3 champion, and then you've got a really experienced hand like Jen Daruvula, and neither of them really were able to deliver the sort of results that Prema are looking for. I think Dennis Hauger was a real surprise. I think it's probably unfair that we expected so much of him after the way that Oscar Piastri came up into a Prema as F3 champion and delivered in the way that he did. And, Hauger didn't quite manage to do that. And he had a lot of difficult moments at the start of the season. Bahrain, he got released without one of the wheels on. And then I think it was in Saudi Arabia, the message came out that you were to go along the main straight, not just a second. It was the pit lane being closed a second after they told them to go through the pit lane, and Prema had some confusion. He went through the pit lane and then had a 10-second stop go, and it just never quite seemed to got going for him. And Jane Daruvula looked really quick at so many points this season, but it took him all the way until Monza to get that first feature race win, his first feature race win in all of Formula 2. It was a season of what could have been, but they'll hope to have learned from that and hopefully rebuild for next season, because they want to be up there challenging for the title.
They'll be back, won't they? They'll be back. LA, High Tech.
High Tech. Maybe they could have done better. I don't know. There's just been highs and lows. I still can't get those images out of my mind of, when he hit that barrier in the castle section, poor Yori. That was, and I think that really, even though he hadn't been sort of winning races consistently up until then, I think that was a big turnaround for him. And I really feel like his season, if it wasn't going to get much better from there. And he's such a nice young man as well. So I'm very sorry that his season went the way it did, and the fact that he's left, we won't see him again.
If you were to look at it after the first round in Bahrain, the first couple of rounds, and look at his pace, and then say he would finish 11th in the championship, I don't think anyone would have thought that. It's really not gone to plan for him, and he's the sort of aggressive, pacey driver that Red Bull would love. And so it's such a shame that for several reasons it just hasn't worked out this year for Yuri Vips.
Yeah, and a massive shout out to Marcus Armstrong as well, obviously off to IndyCar. He's got that drive confirmed for next season, so best of luck to him. Craig, Dams, fairly positive season for them, right?
Yeah, I think they're another team that's quietly shown some progress throughout the campaign. Qualifying was always a big bugbear as soon as the 18-inch rim tyres came in, and I think by Abu Dhabi, but it's pretty clear that they've gotten on top of that, at least in that configuration of circuit, for example. Ayumu Iwasa just rocketed onto the scene, pulled us some outrageous overtakes, one of the surprises of the season. And Roy Nissany came on really strong towards the end of the year as well. Obviously had that fantastic qualifying at Abu Dhabi. as well. So, yeah, I think all in all, it's a very good building year for Dams, for them to really springboard into 2023 with.
I was just going to say, I think we need to look out for Awasa next season.
Yeah.
The end of last season, he won in Abu Dhabi, and all he had to say after the race was, "I want to improve. There's so many areas where I can do better." And he was so focused on it. He's such a determined driver, and I think he's going to build. And I think he's certainly one to watch for 2023.
Really strong lineup next year as well. Awasa and Arthur Leclerc. I think that's definitely ones to watch for next season. Virtuosi, Lawrence, 7th in the team standings. They'll be I know Jack Doohan obviously has had a fairly good season, but they'll be a little bit disappointed by that, won't they?
Yeah, it's been very one-sided in terms of Doohan doing the brunt of the work and getting the points there. But even for Doohan, it's not gone completely to plan with the pace that he's had from pole position in the very first weekend to finishing 6th in the standings. It just hasn't quite gone his way from the start of the season in Bahrain, clipping his wing with Pourchaire, to the crash with Hauger in Imola. But I think he's one that's lining himself up very well for an Alpine seat in a couple of years' time, depending if that seat sort of opens up for him.
Absolutely, and could well do if Lewis Hamilton retires and Esteban Ocon goes to Mercedes. Could happen. Yeah. What's his space? Charus, LA.
But their plan was to finish 5th in the championship, and I think were they 8th in the end? Yeah. So they didn't quite go to plan there, but to be fair, Enzo Fittipaldi has carried that entire team pretty much himself for, I think it was only 3 points. He didn't get himself, wasn't it?
Yeah. Trident, Craig. Great. Well, they had a win, didn't they, with Richard Bashaw?
Yeah, the season started brilliantly.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't get much better.
Two, really, didn't they? But
Spielberg.
And they look very strong at Jeddah as well. But I think those are two very, very bizarre circuits, and I don't think that really sort of defines how a season is going to progress. But I mean, ultimately, I think it just shows how competitive this championship has been, where you've got a team like Trident who have shown that they can be right at the front, and they're finishing 9th in the standings, and it's like we're only talking like tenths or hundredths of a second, over consistently over a race weekend. We could be talking a team that scored 50, 80, 100 more points, for example. So yeah, obviously good to see Bashaw back as well. He's one of the drivers who really sort of manages himself, really at this level, which is very, very rare. And whatever he does next year, I'm sure he's going to do fantastic.
Lawrence, VAR, first season in Formula 2, scored 30 points in the last 2 weekends of the season to leapfrog Campos, which meant they didn't finish last in the standings. First season for them, would they be happy with that?
Yeah, I think so. Box ticks, first season, they will have learned a lot from it. They struggled a lot at various points of the season in terms of tyre management. I think Jake Hughes got into a lot of really good positions, but just sort of faded through the field so often. And that makes perfect sense. They're still learning the tyres, and they'll rebuild again for next season and hopefully come out with a bit more of a consistent car. And I think Juan Manuel Correa said as he filled in Abu Dhabi that he's sure that VAR is a team that will get to the front eventually. They've got the know-how. They've proved themselves in Formula 3, so a good future, I think, for VAR in Formula 2. And I hope they'll be in the sport for a long while.
Absolutely. And last but not least, LA Campos. A bit of an up and down season for them. Obviously a difficult one with Ralph Boschung being in and out of the car, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a real shame because they didn't feel. They brought Roberto Meri in, didn't they? Who actually had a most amazing race, didn't he?
It's crazy.
Oh, a couple of races. Yeah, what started 21st, finished. Well, they dropped him down to P5, but
he would have won the race if he hadn't
exactly.
Track limits. He would have won the race, which is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a great story. So it was a shame to see Ralph obviously lead the sport for a number of races. I think it was 12 races in total. I think. With that neck injury, and I think that that was a big influence on the team and the results. Because he's a great driver. Really, he's one of those kind of drivers that, in a way, that even if the car's not working properly, he still seems to get it up there. He still seems to be fighting at the front. So he's got some quite extraordinary abilities, I feel. They'll be disappointed, I think, in their season. they all work really, really hard in that paddock, but those guys were really focused, really working quite hard, and just couldn't get those results at the end of the day. So yeah, there's not much else to add apart from the fact that hopefully next season, they'll come back bigger, stronger. They've had some great moments in the past, and they'll have some great moments again.
Absolutely, and hopefully we'll see Ralph Boschung in the car every weekend next season. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Okay, a few questions now. We had a question from Aaron on Instagram who asked, which driver surprised you the most this season? Lawrence, we'll start with you.
That's a tricky one. There's a few drivers that surprised me. I think Ayumu Iwasa the most. The way he came in and did his sort of last to first challenge in Bahrain, it was unbelievable. And he's just sort of, I think, quite quietly built up his pace throughout the season and showing a great deal of talent, and has managed to sneak in there at P5 in the championship. So I think he's my surprise package of 2022.
Hey.
Same for me, sorry. We haven't discussed this beforehand, so sorry if there's repetition. But yeah, absolutely, Ayumu Iwasa, my goodness, what a surprise, and what an amazing talent he is. And not just a talent, with talent comes hard work. Even somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo in football he was born with a gift, but he's not that good just because he rolls out of bed every day, at 12 o'clock at midday. He works hard. Ayumu Iwasa is one of the hardest, if not the hardest working driver in that paddock. He is the very last person to leave. And he is sitting in that car when they're doing practice pit stops. Sometimes with other teams, you'll see engineers sitting there. He is the one sat in that car. He's the one sat in Roy Nizani's car doing practice pit stops, and his own car. So he is so hardworking. He's so focused. So it's not only the fact that it's a surprise because of what happened in Bahrain at the very beginning of that season with all of those overtakes. He is absolutely 100% capable, and there's just so much more, many more great moments to come from him in Formula 2 and absolutely in Formula 1.
Yep, and I'm sure he won't mind a comparison to the great Cristiano Ronaldo. Craig, surprise of the season for you?
Well, I'm going to have to go with someone different, then,
Yeah,
I suppose,
yeah,
aren't I,
please,
by
yeah.
default? Yeah. So I'm going to have to go with Logan Sargent, I think. I'm not going to compare him to Cristiano Ronaldo, but I certainly think he had a very, very strong season as a whole. He was really, really consistent all the way through. And what really surprised me most was when the Formula One opportunity started to come on the line. It was then that he really started to knuckle down and to get the results that he needed to make sure that he got into Formula One. And when you're fighting for something as big as that, when you need to deliver a certain number of points or whatever it is in a series as random as Formula 2, or a championship as random as Formula 2, he went out and he delivered the results that he needed to deliver. And that's the sort of metric that you tend to weigh the really good drivers against the really, really good drivers. And Logan, at the end of the day, he got the job done, which is exactly what he and Williams needed him to do.
Absolutely. I think Enzo Fittipaldi, for me, stood out as a real surprise this season. Did very, very well. Had a very strong season. And, interesting to see what he can do as a Red Bull Junior driver next season, isn't it? Okay, Logan Sargent _UK fans on Instagram asked, what do you think of all the rookies this season? Lawrence, who was your rookie of the season?
I think, much to the delight of the Logan Sargent fan club, I think it's going to have to be Logan Sargent, highest placed rookie, and that level of consistency that we talk about so often, to do that as a rookie in your first season, I think is really, really impressive, and I think that's a big part of why he's gone into Formula One, is because Williams can see that ability to learn and drive fast very quickly, not having been in the series for very long. So I think Sargent is the easy choice, I suppose.
Craig, going to come to you next.
Certainly a mixed bag, I think, for the rookies this year. Obviously, we've had some really, really impressive ones come in, but they've mostly done so with very strong teams or teams that have been on the up. And then there are others who have come in and perhaps not quite delivered on the expectations that many of us had. We've already spoken about some of them already, but I think it needs to be sort of understood that this is a very different championship compared to Formula 3, for example. There are lots of different nuances with the car. And, understandably, it will take some of them a bit of time to properly get up to speed. And we're seeing glimpses of that from the likes of Hauger, Vesti, and so forth. So that shouldn't necessarily be like a massive red splodge on their entire junior career at the end of the day. There's no reason why they can't come in and be really impressive next year and use that as a springboard to move on to greater things afterwards.
And LA, your rookie of the season?
Well, I think that they'll be happy as well with my answer, because my answer is Logan Sargent too. F1 is desperate for an American driver, and thank goodness Logan Sargent's here, because he will do the job.
Absolutely. And one last question for you all then. Moment of the season for you, Lawrence?
I think my moment of the season might have happened right at the very end, watching Iwasa try to drive away from Felipe Drugovich in that very last race of the season, because it came right down to the wire. It was such a brilliant battle between the two drivers that just went on lap after lap. And you've got Iwasa, who's coming as the rookie, just desperately defending from the man who's already won the title. It was a brilliant battle to see, and it's that sort of close racing, lap after lap, that building up of tension and of pressure, then that close wheel-to-wheel racing, Iwasa forcing Drugovich wide coming out of the new turn 9, I think it is. It was a brilliant one to watch, and my highlight of the season.
LA, highlight of the season, moment of the season?
So that Baku weekend, basically, it was absolutely crazy. I think there were 6 safety cars in all, over both races, constantly starting, stopping, drivers crashing into each other. We had that big pile-up with Chen Bollock-Bassi, Callum Williams, Boschung. I think Sato was involved. There's just cars all over the place, basically. And, of course, we've mentioned Vips and that weekend. So as far as the summary of F2 goes, because Formula 2 is very, very physical, and that was the epitome of the physicality of this particular series.
Yeah, great choice as well. Really good choice. And finally, Craig, highlight or moment of the season?
I think for me it has to be Felipe Drugovich's double in Barcelona.
Yeah.
He's won 3 out of the last 4 F2 races at Barcelona now. So, yeah, absolutely commanding performance. And I think that weekend really sort of set the tone, I think, for the rest of the campaign. Very standard Formula 2 chaos, all sorts of carnage going on, and you got a brilliant driver like Felipe coming through and absolutely just crushing the rest of the opposition, throughout the weekend.
Yeah, it set up his championship nicely, didn't it? So for me, I think it's got to be JM Correa returning in his in the final race round of the season at Abu Dhabi. I think it was a really nice moment. I'm really looking forward to seeing him in Formula 2 next season. Before we go, I dived into the Inside F2 archive, guys, to have a look at our pre-season predictions, Lawrence and LA. So LA, you're going to start with...
I can't remember what I said.
No, well, I'm going to tell you exactly what you said. So LA, let's start with yours. Drivers' champion, you went for Teo Porcher.
Oh, so close, so close.
Teams champions, you went with Prema. And I've got a quote for you, LA. This is your quote. This is, with the experience of Jehan Daruvala and Formula 3 champion Dennis Hauger, this duo could potentially collect enough championship points between them to blow every other season's total out of the water. Craig, score out of 10 for that prediction.
Let's go with 5 to be kind.
I mean, Inside F2, we're not very good with our predictions, are we? If you check out our pre-season, our 2023 driver predictions, they're not going overly well at the moment either. Lawrence, drivers champion, you went for Teo Porcher. Teams champions, you also went for Prema. You said last year's champions are unlikely to drop the ball. And Dennis Hauger and Jehan Daruvala have one of the most exciting young drivers around, paired with the experienced hands of the growing in confidence and consistency of Jehan Daruvala.
I think everything I said was absolutely right. They're not going to drop the ball, and they're all brilliantly talented drivers. It's just that some other drivers and teams were better.
And Craig, you marks out of 10 for that one?
Well, I think it's going to have to be a 5 again for that one, to be honest.
Okay, there you go. I dug out my own one as well. Yeah, So I also went for Teo Porcher. He was obviously a favourite. I said that I think that there'll be a season-long battle between Teo Porcher, Liam Lawson, and Yuri Vips. Not great. And the team's champions, I said the experience of Liam Lawson and the raw speed of Logan Sargent makes Carlin the favourites for me. Marks out of 10 for that prediction. 5 again? Or...
No, I think that's better.
About 6.
About 6. I'll take it, yeah.
thought Carlin was a good chat. I would have given him a
Yeah,
7.
right, second.
Ah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Producer James, sign me up. I'll be a guest next season. I'll join the panel as well. So there you go. Out of our team of 15 people who took part in those predictions, not one of us predicted Felipe Dragovic to win the title, and only one person even mentioned Felipe Dragovic as a name in the title hunt, if you like. So shout out to Ryan Swartz for that one. That's a very good prediction.
Ryan.
Very good, very good. Okay, that's all we got time for today. My thanks to Lawrence to LA and to Craig for joining me on the podcast today. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, next time.